Hello viewers, how are you? Hope you are fine. Welcome back to my channel Drawing Time with a Story. And if you are new in my channel, I will introduce myself and my channel with you. I am Surya Parveen, and in my channel I select a theme or an object to draw, and while drawing you will not get bored because I will gossip with you. I will narrate a story related to the topic, or simply we just discuss about the things just happen around us. So let's get started about today's topic. As you saw, my today's topic is focused on a fancy place, an empty swing, and a rose was fallen on the ground. All the things indicate a lonely lady who is waiting for his Prince Charming. Every person has a desire for her Prince Charming. When I shared the theme with one of my friends, she just imagined and wrote a story for me, though it was a short story but full of passion and imagination. So, here is the story. Here comes the bee, coming from far away places, wandering around in the universe until he saw a beautiful rose. He approached to the rose, gave all the hugs and kisses, and rose became so radiant. And I think that is the desire, or the what should I say? It's a passion for every girl. Every girl is desire for a Prince Charming. So I searched a lot for the Prince Charming concept. From where the concept of Prince Charming came in us. So I found a website that is named Bewildering Stories, and the author is just awesome. He just elaborated a story about the legend of Prince Charming. So let's jump to the story. Have you ever wondered why so many stories about beautiful women and handsome princes inevitably have Prince Charming as the handsome prince? Either he was a Dark Ages version of Hugh Hefner, or quite possibly he was more than one man. I believe the latter could be true. Here is how the story about the legendary Prince Charming and his exploits may have come into existence. During the 2nd century AD, a patrician named Marcus had a slave named Philip, whom he had trained to fight in the arena as a gladiator. The man was strong, intelligent, and extremely handsome. He became quite proficient with all the weapons used in the arena and was pitted against some of the best gladiators to ever fight in the region, we know as France today. His master became wealthy, wagering on his slave, and promised him that if he won enough matches to make him independently wealthy, he would be given the most beautiful slave girl in his possession. So, for nearly a decade, Philip fought all comers. But nearly every time it looked like his master was going to become wealthy, he would waste his money foolishly on bankers and gambling. But the brave gladiator had his eye on the drop-dead gorgeous Helena from Greece. She also loved Philip and became his companion, who shared his meals and bed, which his master believed would give him the incentive to win his matches. At long last, the day of his marriage arrived. Then his master gave him enough gold to purchase not only his freedom and that of his wife, but also of a plot of land near peasant village of Chambers in France. When Marcus died a few years later, Philip was presented with half of his slaves and half of his wealth. This inheritance was enough to make Philip a wealthy and powerful man in the region. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the descendants of Philip and his wife became descendants of Philip, that are commonly known as they became known as the Prince of Chamber. Over the centuries, the name was corrupted into Prince Charming. But it wasn't until the 12th century that the legendary exploits of the first man, known as Prince Charming, took place. Philip and his brother Charles traveled to China after fighting in one of the crusades and dealt with merchants, doctors, scientists, and royalty in order to enrich themselves in knowledge as well as material goods. Philip studied Chinese medicine and collected the various ingredients for herbal medicines as well as medical instruments like acupuncture needles and a tube that allowed a person to hear the human heart beating when it was placed against the chest. One day at a banquet, Charles committed an unforgivable breach of etiquette which cost his head and forced his brother to flee for his life back to France. He managed to bring back medicines, instruments, and some gems which made him a wealthy man. But the ties he had established with China were broken. It wasn't until the Polos traveled to China that Europe was able to reestablish trade with the Far East. The first woman the Prince of Chamber met, who is included in the Prince Charming legend, was Mariam of Orleans. She was suffering from anemia, which caused people to refer to her as Sleeping Beauty. Philip administered some herbs in a tea and brought her out of her constant slumber. Within a few weeks, she only needed the normal amount of sleep each night and married the man who made it possible. Years later, Henry, the Prince of Chamber, met a young woman named Lucy, who lived in Germany with 7 dwarfs that had once been household dwarfs of various nobles. They had adopted her when she had been abandoned by her parents on the doorstep of their home in the woods. She is now known as Snow White because of her pale complexion and pure heart. A local woman who was jealous of her gave her a poisoned apple which didn't kill her but left her in a coma. So it was fate that brought the prince and Louis together. He happened to be in the area and heard about her plight. He traveled to her home and administered an antidote to the poison. But instead of awakening, her heart stopped and she stopped breathing. The prince had read in the Bible how God had breathed the breath of life into Adam. So he attempted to revive her by placing his mouth over hers and forcing air into her lungs. He also pressed upon her chest as an early form of CPR and eventually brought her back to life. The story about the incident only records that Henry kissed her and brought her back to consciousness. Later, the incident about Sleeping Beauty also included a kiss, even though it was the tea that brought her around. That is so fascinating. And one of the incidents which had the prince meet a beautiful woman happened in Romania. A woman named Rapunzel was the youngest of 3 sisters. Her oldest sister ran away with a fisherman, which infuriated her mother. The woman chose a rich merchant to be the second sister's spouse, but he often would get drunk and beat his wife. So the mother was very frustrated and decided her last daughter would be reserved for the best man who could be found. She placed Mara in a tower that overlooked the Black Sea for 20 years from the time she was 15 until the day she was freed from her captivity by Karl. Karl had heard about the woman and her supposed long golden hair. In reality, it was a rope ladder. For a distance, it appeared to be ultra long locks of hair. Karl attempted to climb the ladder, but Mara's mother servant whipped the princess back a few feet from the window and at the top of the tower. Fortunately, he didn't break anything when he landed on the ground. Some bushes cushioned his fall. Instead of trying to climb the garden ladder again, Karl decided to tunnel out through the sandstone cliff upon which the tower was built. It took him nearly a week to bore through the rock with a shovel and knives and break through inside the base of the tower. He then climbed the stairs, which hadn't been used since Rapunzel was committed to the tower when she was a girl. It was evening and Mara was about to drift off to sleep when the prince forced his way into her room. The prince was as filthy as a pig, but that didn't matter to Mara, who gladly escaped with him. By morning, when her mother's servant came to the tower with breakfast, the prince and Mara were miles away. They named their first daughter after Mara's mother, but until the day she died, the old women resented Karl and considered her daughter a kidnap victim. And Romeo and Juliet are also a part of the Prince Charming legend. The ball that was held in Verona was in honor of the Prince of Chamber, Andre, who was supposed to be in the area. He had been detained by a young woman in Torino, who held him captive for a week until he managed to escape. But by then the ball had been held and Romeo had intercepted Juliet. Both the women who was infatuated with the prince and Juliet committed suicide in dramatic ways. Juliet died in the way Shakespeare wrote, while the other woman threw herself from the tower in which she had imprisoned the prince. The last woman who was a part of the Prince Charming legend was Cinderella. Her father had built up a trading operation that had connections with merchants in the Far East and the New World during the early 100s and 600s. Her father had no son, so he taught his daughter about the art of business. His first wife died, so he married a woman who had two plain-looking daughters. It was more for companionship than for love that caused him to marry the women. It was a mistake that he regretted up to the day of his untimely death. Cinderella was treated like dirt. She would have run the trading operations. Instead, her stepmother hired a man who slowly bled the women's finances dry. When the ball was announced in which the prince was to be in attendance, the stepmother bought gowns and satin slippers for her daughters, but nothing for Cinderella. And the after history we all know about the Cinderella. So the prince fell in love with Cinderella and was about to propose marriage when the clock began to strike midnight. Cinderella fled the ball, but one of her crystal slippers fell from her foot as she climbed aboard the carriage which her away from the palace where the ball was being held. And Cinderella has two daughters. Anna Maria married a merchant while her sister Carla Juliana married a general. So there is the overall history of the legend of the Prince Charming. I hope you enjoyed the video and the drawing too. So please don't forget to subscribe my channel to stay connected with me, to stay connected with Drawing Time with the Story. We will meet very soon with a new drawing and obviously with a brand new story just for you. Bye.